When a good man finally decides to walk away, something unexpected happens within the psychological structure of a narcissistic woman. The illusion of control begins to collapse. For a long time, the relationship may have revolved around subtle manipulation, emotional testing, and the constant shifting of power. A narcissistic personality often maintains influence not through obvious domination, but through psychological tension, through making the other person doubt themselves, seek approval, and continuously try to prove their worth. A good man, especially one who is patient and emotionally aware, may tolerate this dynamic far longer than he should. He tries to understand. He tries to communicate. He tries to repair what seems broken. But in doing so, he unknowingly becomes part of the system that allows the narcissistic structure to remain intact. His patience becomes interpreted as weakness. His forgiveness becomes interpreted as permission. Yet the moment he reaches clarity, when he finally recognizes the pattern and chooses distance, the entire framework shifts. The control she believed she had was never truly stable. It depended entirely on his continued participation. The narcissistic mind often assumes permanence. It assumes that the person providing attention, stability, and emotional grounding will always remain available. But when that man calmly withdraws his presence, something deeply unsettling occurs. The predictable game ends. The emotional reactions she once relied on are no longer there. The arguments no longer work. The provocations fall into silence. What once felt like control suddenly reveals itself as dependency. Psychologically speaking, narcissism fears one thing above all else: the loss of influence. Not simply losing a person, but losing the ability to shape that person's emotions and attention. When a good man walks away without anger, without begging, and without begging, and without returning to the cycle, he breaks the illusion that sustained the dynamic. And in that moment, the narcissistic mind confronts something it rarely expects: the realization that power only exists when someone agrees to stay inside the game. The lesson is simple, yet profound. Sometimes the most powerful move a man can make is not to fight for control, but to quietly reclaim it by walking away. When a good man walks away, another psychological shift begins to unfold, one that cuts even deeper than the loss of control. What disappears with him is not only the relationship itself, but a powerful and often overlooked source of validation. Human beings naturally seek recognition. We all want to feel seen, appreciated, and valued. But within a narcissistic personality, this need becomes amplified to an unhealthy degree. Instead of developing a stable sense of self from within, the narcissistic individual builds their identity almost entirely from external reflection, from how others respond to them, admire them, or emotionally invest in them. This is where the good man plays an important role in the dynamic. He often provides something rare: patience, loyalty, and emotional attention. Even when he is hurt, he tries to understand. Even when he feels unappreciated, he continues to give. His presence becomes a constant stream of validation. His care reassures her that she is admired, desired, and important. Yet here lies the hidden paradox. The more sincere and stable the good man is, the more his validation becomes quietly taken for granted. Over time, his appreciation no longer feels special. It simply feels expected. The narcissistic mind begins to assume that this source of attention will never disappear. But the moment he walks away, that stream suddenly dries up. What once felt endless now becomes absence. The messages stop. The emotional reactions disappear. The quiet admiration that once surrounded her presence is no longer there. And this absence creates a psychological vacuum. Because when validation has always come from the outside, Its disappearance leaves a person standing face to face with themselves. The narcissistic personality is not prepared for that silence. Without the steady reflection from someone who genuinely cared, the carefully maintained image begins to feel unstable. And this is the deeper fear, not simply losing a person, but losing the mirror that constantly confirmed their worth. The good man may believe he was just offering love and patience, but in truth, he was holding up a mirror that the narcissistic personality depended on more than she realized. And when that mirror is gone, the question that remains is unavoidable. Who are you when no one is left to constantly remind you of your value? When the good man walks away, something else enters the space he leaves behind: silence. And psychologically speaking, silence can be one of the most confronting experiences a person can face. In many unhealthy relational dynamics, constant interaction serves a hidden purpose. Arguments, emotional reactions, dramatic conversations, and cycles of conflict keep attention moving outward. They create noise, and that noise prevents deeper reflection. As long as the game continues, the focus remains on the other person, what they did wrong, how they reacted, how they failed to understand. For a narcissistic personality, this external focus is essential. It protects the fragile structure of the ego from being examined too closely. The mind becomes skilled at redirecting attention outward, assigning blame, and maintaining the belief that the problem always lies somewhere else. But when the good man withdraws completely, the noise stops. There are no more reactions to provoke, no emotional debates to dominate, no one left to chase, criticize, or manipulate into responding. The psychological stage that once held constant activity becomes quiet. And in that quiet, something uncomfortable begins to emerge. Silence has a unique quality. It reflects. It acts almost like a mirror placed in front of the mind. Without distraction, a person is left with their own thoughts, their own patterns, and the echoes of their own behavior. For someone who has avoided self-reflection, this can feel deeply unsettling, because the absence of the other person removes the easiest escape route: projection. There is no longer someone nearby to carry the blame or absorb the emotional tension. The good man, often without realizing it, once served as a kind of buffer between the narcissistic personality and this internal confrontation. His presence allowed the cycle to continue. His patience gave the dynamic a place to operate. But his absence introduces something far more powerful than confrontation: awareness. And awareness, as psychology repeatedly teaches us, is the first step toward truth. When the noise fades and the silence begins to speak, a person can no longer escape the patterns they once avoided. Because in the end, the quiet left behind by someone who walks away does something no argument ever could. It forces a person to finally meet themselves. There is another psychological layer that begins to surface once the good man walks away, and it touches a fear that is rarely spoken about openly: the fear of being truly seen. A good man is often not simply end or patient. Very often, he is perceptive. He listens carefully, he observes quietly, and over time he begins to understand the emotional patterns of the person in front of him. This type of awareness is not loud or confrontational. In fact, it usually develops slowly, almost silently, as he pieces together the inconsistencies between words, actions, and intentions. In the beginning, a narcissistic personality may not feel threatened by this. On the surface, admiration and attention from a thoughtful man can feel reassuring. But as time passes, something subtle begins to happen. The good man starts to notice the cycles, the manipulation hidden inside affection, the shifting of blame, the emotional games that create confusion rather than clarity. And when a person begins to see these patterns clearly, their behavior changes. They stop reacting in predictable ways. They stop chasing approval. They stop defending themselves against accusations that no longer hold weight. Their calm becomes different. It is no longer the calm of patience, but the calm of understanding. For the narcissistic mind, this shift is deeply unsettling. Because control depends on the other person remaining emotionally entangled, it requires confusion, doubt, and constant reaction. But once someone sees through the pattern, the illusion loses its power. When the good man finally walks away, he carries something with him that cannot easily be taken back: clarity. And this is where the deeper fear begins to appear. The narcissistic woman may sense that the person who once cared deeply now understands her completely. Not the image she tried to project, but the patterns beneath it. To be truly seen in this way removes the protective mask. It means someone has witnessed the manipulation, the insecurity behind the dominance, the fragile ego beneath the performance. And once someone sees the truth and chooses to leave rather than fight for the illusion, the dynamic changes forever. Because the greatest threat to any illusion is not confrontation, it is quiet understanding. When someone finally sees clearly and walks away peacefully, they leave behind a message more powerful than any argument ever could. The truth no longer needs your permission to exist. As the distance grows and the good man remains gone, another shift begins to reveal itself, one that touches the deeper mechanics of narcissistic behavior. Psychologically, narcissism depends on something often referred to as emotional supply. This supply comes from attention, admiration, reactions, and emotional energy from other people. It is the fuel that keeps the narcissistic ego stable. Now, it is important to understand that emotional supply does not always come in the form of praise. Even conflict can serve the same purpose. Arguments, frustration, emotional pleading, attempts to explain oneself. All of these responses keep the narcissistic personality at the center of someone else's emotional world. As long as the other person is reacting, the supply continues. The good man often provides a particularly powerful form of this supply. His reactions are genuine. His emotions are sincere. When he feels hurt, he expresses it honestly. When he tries to repair the relationship, he invests real energy and thought into doing so. To the narcissistic personality, this kind of emotional engagement becomes extremely valuable. But what many people do not realize is that this engagement also creates dependency. The narcissistic individual becomes accustomed to the emotional responses of the good man. His concern, his attempts to understand, even his disappointment, all of it reinforces the sense that she remains psychologically significant in his life. Then one day, the reactions stop. There are no more explanations, no more emotional debates, no more attempts to resolve the pattern. The good man simply withdraws his energy and directs it elsewhere. And in doing so, he unknowingly cuts off the very source that sustained the dynamic. This is why true emotional detachment can feel so destabilizing to a narcissistic personality. It removes the stage on which the drama once unfolded. Without reactions, there is no reinforcement. Without attention, there is no supply. What once felt like influence suddenly turns into emptiness. And this reveals a powerful psychological truth. Narcissistic control does not survive in silence. It survives through engagement. When a person stops feeding the cycle loses its power. The cycle loses its power, which leads to a lesson worth remembering. The greatest freedom a person can reclaim is their emotional energy, because the moment you stop supplying it to the wrong dynamic, you also stop sustaining the illusion that held you there. As time passes after the good man has walked away, a realization may slowly begin to form. one that challenges a belief the narcissistic mind often holds with great confidence. It is the belief that people are easily replaceable. In many narcissistic dynamics, relationships are viewed less as deep emotional bonds and more as interchangeable roles. If one person leaves, another can simply step in. The tension can be found elsewhere. Admiration can be recreated. The pattern can begin again with someone new. On the surface, this assumption appears to protect the narcissistic personality from loss. But reality has a way of revealing distinctions that the ego tries to ignore. A genuinely strong man is not defined by loud dominance or constant pursuit. His strength lies in something far quieter: self respect, emotional stability, and the ability to walk away when a relationship becomes destructive. These qualities are not as common as people often assume. They require maturity, awareness, and a sense of internal grounding. During the relationship, these traits may have been overlooked or underestimated. Patience may have been mistaken for weakness. Understanding may have been interpreted as compliance. The good man's calm presence may have seemed predictable, even ordinary. Yet once he is gone, comparison begins to emerge. New attention may appear, but it often carries a different quality. Some may offer admiration without depth. Others may engage in the same games without providing the stability that once existed. The emotional balance that the good man quietly maintained becomes noticeably absent, and slowly a difficult realization can arise. Authentic character is not easily replaced. What once seemed abundant reveals itself to be rare, not because good men are perfect, but because genuine integrity, patience, and self respect are uncommon combinations. When someone with those qualities leaves permanently, the absence can echo long after the relationship itself has ended. For the man who walked away, this realization is not something he needs to witness or prove. It unfolds on its own. Because in life, the people who are easiest to underestimate are often the ones whose absence teaches the most powerful lesson. And when you choose to live with dignity and self respect, you may walk away quietly. But the impact of that decision speaks long after you are gone.